Welcome to the African Weekly Roundup, a weekly program every Sunday here on HORUFADHI Media, where I discuss the latest news and events across the African continent. I'm Sultan Mohammed, your host and producer here on HORUFADHI Media. We hope you find this program very informative. Please like, share, and for similar content, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media. Also, do subscribe to HORUFADHI Media Group's second channel, known as HORUFADHI TV, where you are currently watching this program, and where you can find other exclusive programs just behind the scenes and Mahahir Salah, among others. And last but not least, do follow myself, Sultan Mohammed, Suleiman Hashi, Yasin Abdi, and the wider HORUFADHI Media team on our social media platforms that should appear on the screen any moment. Let's get straight into the news. Now over to our top story in Burkina Faso, where the country suffers its second coup in a year. An army captain on Friday announced the ouster of military leader Paul-Henri Damiba and the suspension of the country's constitution and transitional charter in a statement read on national television, declaring himself the military leader. Now, this military leader, Army Captain Ibrahim Traoré, said a group of officers had decided to remove the former president due to his inability to deal with worsening Islamist insurgencies. He announced that Burkina Faso's borders were closed indefinitely and that all political and civil society activities were suspended. Now, Burkina Faso's self-declared military coup leader, Captain Ibrahim Traoré, said currently the situation was under control. Now, around 15 soldiers in fatigues appeared on radio television broadcasters shortly before 8 p.m. local time and read out the following statement. "We have decided to take our responsibilities driven by a single ideal, the restoration of security and integrity of our territory," they said on Friday. Reports indicate that a curfew had been imposed immediately from 9 p.m. to 5 p.m. local time across the capital. Now, earlier on that day, Friday, gunfire rang out in the capital, and the state broadcaster went off air amid fears of a coup. Soldiers were seen at the city's main roads, especially in the Awuga 2000 neighborhood, but also outside the state television center. Now, violence has also for a long time wrecked the landlocked West African country, where the former President Damiba took power in a January coup, ousting elected leader Roch Marc Christian. Now, Damiba had pledged to restore civilian rule within 2 years and to defeat the armed factions. As in bordering countries, insurgents affiliated with Al-Qaeda and Islamic State group have stoked the unrest. Thousands have died, and about 2 million people have been displaced by fighting since 2015, when the insurgency spread into Burkina Faso, which has since become the epicenter of the violence across the Sahel. Damiba earlier this month sacked his defense minister and assumed the role himself. The mini shuffle, the first since the appointment of a transitional government in March, saw only one new minister introduced. Colonel Major Silas Kita was named minister delegate in charge of national defense and promoted to brigadier general. Now more than 40% of Burkina Faso, a former French colony, is outside the government control. Attacks have increased since mid-March, despite the junta's vow to make its security top priority. Now, security forces fired tear gas at dozens of rock-throwing protesters outside the French embassy in Burkina Faso this afternoon, according to news reports. Supporters of the coup had gathered outside the building in the capital a day after the president, or the military leader, accused a man he disposed of hiding out at a French base to plot a counter-offensive. With French troops watching from the rooftop, protesters had set fire to barriers outside and lobbed rocks at the structure when tear gas volleys were fired. Now, the new military leaders of Burkina Faso said on Sunday that the situation was under control, urging people to refrain from acts of vandalism targeting the French embassy and the French military base, a statement read on national television. Now, in a statement read out on national television on Saturday, signed by Captain Ibrahim Traoré, the country's new leader, the officers said Damiba is believed to have taken refuge in a French base in order to plan a counter-offensive to stir up trouble in our defense and security forces, it read. Later on Saturday, Damiba rejected the allegations that he was at a French base but provided no further details about his whereabouts. Now, France on Saturday denied any involvement in the coup or any involvement in hosting or protecting Burkina Faso officials. Now, the African Union chief Moussa Feki has also weighed in the situation, condemning the unconstitutional change of government, he put it, in Burkina Faso after the second coup in less than a year, in which a group of junior army officers removed military ruler Paul-Henri Damiba. The chairperson calls upon the military to immediately and totally refrain from any acts of violence or threats to the civilian population, civil liberties, and human rights, the African Union said in a statement on Saturday, calling for the restoration of the constitutional order by July next year at the latest. Earlier, the regional bloc, the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, reaffirmed its unequivocal opposition to the coup. The ECOWAS said the coup came at an opportune time when progress was being made towards a return to a constitutional order. ECOWAS reaffirms its unequivocal opposition to any seizure or maintenance of power by unconstitutional means, the regional bloc said in a statement shared on social media. Now, the UN has also voiced concern about the situation in the country, while the European Union has condemned the coup. Now, over to East Africa, in Uganda, where a Tanzania doctor working in the country who contracted Ebola has died, the first healthcare worker killed by the disease in the latest outbreak in the country, Uganda's health ministry said on Saturday. I regret to announce that we have lost our first doctor, Dr. Ibrahim Muhammad Ali, a Tanzanian national, 37 years old, male, the health minister said. She said Ali had tested positive for Ebola on September 26th and died while receiving treatment at the hospital in Fort Portal, a town about 300 kilometers west of the capital Kampala. Authorities in the East African nation announced the outbreak of the deadly disease on September 20th, triggering fears of a major health crisis in the country of 45 million people. There is no vaccine for the Sudan strain of the disease behind the latest Uganda infections. The health ministry said on Friday, before Ali's death, the disease so far had infected 35 people and killed 7. Ali was among 6 health workers who have contracted the disease. Ebola mainly spreads through contact with bodily fluids of any infected person. The viral disease has symptoms including intense weakness, muscle pain, headaches, and a sore throat, vomiting, diarrhea, and rashes, among others. Scientists and health officials are now pushing to start clinical trials for 2 experimental vaccines to protect against the strain, which originated in Sudan in 1976. Even though there are relatively new and powerful Ebola vaccines, they do not protect against the Sudan strain, complicating efforts to quickly stamp out the disease before it overburdens the nation's fragile healthcare system. In central Uganda, where cases were reported, at least 6 medical workers have contracted the virus, as aforementioned, and leading some of their peers to request transfer elsewhere. Now, parents concerned their children will catch the highly contagious virus are withdrawing them from schools, and in a nation that has faced multiple Ebola outbreaks since it reports its first case in 2000, worries persist that another fast-spreading virus could precipitate restrictions that would devastate an economy still reeling from the coronavirus shutdowns. Now, Ebola is a highly contagious disease and is transmitted through contact not just with people but also animals. In 2014-2016 outbreak in West Africa was one of the most deadliest Ebola epidemics, killing more than 11,300 people, followed by the 2018 outbreak in the Democratic Republic of Congo that killed 2,280 people. So far, Ugandan officials have ruled out issuing stay-at-home orders or curfews or restricting movements in schools, markets, or houses of worship. And Uganda is also working with neighboring countries, including Kenya and Rwanda, to step up vigilance at land borders and at airports. Now, over to Somalia, where fights between the Somali government forces backed by local clans against Al-Shabab continues across central Somalia as clashes intensify. Reports emerged from the central Somalia region of Hiran indicate misunderstandings between government forces and local clan militia resulted in allied forces leaving the recent liberated Moqokori region, which is reported to have been overrun by Al-Shabab militants, according to some sources. And the Somali government, led by President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, has been working to support local uprisings, initially in the federal member states of Galmudug and Hirshabelle, before it spread into the Bay region of Southwest State and Gedo region of Jubaland. Earlier this week, Al-Shabab killed 11 civilians in Gedo, close to the Kenyan border, which saw water wells burnt. This comes at a time where Somalia continues to suffer from severe droughts. Just a few days ago, the country was also shocked by the killing of the young Mogadishu police chief, General Farhan Mahmoud Adan Qarole. General Qarole and several of his guards were killed on Friday in a roadside bomb blast near the southern town of Balad, according to Somali authorities. The Somali police confirmed the incident but could not provide further details about the nature of the blast or the number of casualties. A police spokesman said the attack occurred during security operations against targeting the Basra village area on the border of the Middle and Lower Shabelle regions. Now, President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud condemned the attack in a statement. Commissioner Aden and other valiant soldiers who have died in the blast dedicated their lives for Somalia's peace, he said. Now, speaking at the government-sponsored youth conference on Friday in Mogadishu, Somali Prime Minister Hamza Abdi Barre called on Somali youth to unite in the fight against what he called a ruthless enemy. He was referring to Al-Shabab, which has been waging a bloody insurgency in the Horn of Africa nation for more than 15 years. The killing of Mogadishu's police chief followed a government operation on Friday that removed militants from multiple villages along the border between Middle and Lower Shabelle regions. Somalia's Defense Minister Abdul Qadir Mohammed Noor told the Somali National News Agency that troops had also raised several Al-Shabab barracks in 9 villages. These gains are achieved following well-coordinated operations in the early hours of the Friday morning, Defense Minister Noor said. Now that's all the top stories this week on our Africa program. Please tune in next week for another weekly update of events across the African continent.